Hi all, I have another fascinating game of Leela chess to show you, this time against Protector. Protector playing with the white pieces. Will it leave its pieces protected? Okay, so this is in the Chess.com Blitz battle, 5 minutes each with a 2-second increment per move. E4 from Protector, C5, Leela chooses out of choice, no opening book here, the Sicilian defense, and Protector chooses D3. Already, this seems to be a very, very timid choice. It has been seen before in Chess-Based Live Book, but it really doesn't seem to be that ambitious. Until here, F4. This has an element of aggression to it. E6. This is a classic recipe, it seems, to play for D5. Why not? E5. We have Knight D5 here. Knight F3, and now B6. Leela is keen to celebrate the light square weaknesses with this, perhaps this bishop on the diagonal. You can see that white has some squares which this dark square pawn structure has neglected in a way by pushing through E5, that F5 square in particular. And actually we see a lot of Leela's play on the light squares. Bishop B7, and now a beautiful retreat, Knight D E7. So rerouting here to this lovely F5 square. This is a classic recipe against this pawn chain here, this dark square pawn chain. Very, very nice to get a nice knight on F5. D4, and we see that this bishop is a bit of a problem piece, hemmed in by its own pawns in this structure. Okay, on G4, that's just asking for trouble. I mean, just for sake of argument now, to see if there's anything really aggressive what it can do here. It's not going to happen, is it, because of this diagonal. So this is just going to be good for black. There's no problems there, for example. So D4 is played, C takes, and now the lovely D5 square is celebrated here with Knight B4. Knight C3, Rook C8 first, Bishop D2, now Bishop E7, Queen B1, and actually cementing the knight on F5 with H5 to stop any ideas of G4, but also, of course, this pawn could be used as a battering ram to get either like a dreaded form pawn on H3 or just open up lines. So we have A3, the knight goes to that lovely D5 square, knight takes, Bishop D3, and now G6. Being able to recapture with this pawn on Bishop takes F5 would open up that nice G file, of course, and we've got coordination on G2 potentially, along with potentially F6 and King F7, and then maybe even switching pieces to G8 like that. So we have Bishop E4. That's taken off, and now D5. Queen D3. White doesn't really want to give frontal pressure. When I say frontal pressure, against that D pawn. If white ever took here, like en passant, there's pressure on D4, which is unpleasant in this case, and maybe black builds up later on that even more. So Queen D3, King F8. Yes, this is really neat stuff. Why not leave the rook on H8? Rook FC1, King just slides to G7. Queen A6. Queen D7. So really this is positionally gorgeous. Many players with black would love this against this particular pawn structure, to entrench this juicy knight on F5 and to have this structure where there's possibilities even of H4, maybe even Knight G3 sometimes tactically. King G1 gets out of that kind of thing in advance. Rook B8. Interesting, because here it looks as though Leela plans to play something like B5 sometimes and Rook B6. White tries to stop that, but maybe safer. Maybe this is asking for a little bit of trouble. Perhaps White could have done something else here, just not so committal. Maybe putting the queen back, withdrawing the queen. But we have A4, and what happens here is magnificent now. Leela, it looks as though B5 is totally discouraged, right? Because there's pressure on A7, especially if this rook is helping the queen. We've got alignment on A7. So isn't B5 ruled out? guess what Leela plays if I give you 5 seconds starting now. Black to play. Leela plays a gorgeous gambit with b5. So a takes, rook takes, taking this pawn, hitting the queen. And in fact, so the idea is not to take and then take on b2, but a gorgeous gambit here with rook b7. Yeah, so the queen can actually protect now the b2 pawn. You might think, well, what is this? Leela double. So Leela has the alignment, the power of the alignment, the coordination, the pressure. And bishop c3 seems to hold extra pawn. Why is this bad? The disastrous thing for white to do here would be rook ab1, neglecting the a file, and in which case rook a7 actually wins the queen here. The queen's got no squares. And also, if we look for a moment at this position with rook cb1, black actually can just play like this, h4, and then bishop b4 with a small edge, because there's pressure on d4 here. So if that's going to be a big advantage, actually taking on d4. So white should really stay put here and do something else. So yeah, it's a difficult position already. Black's still better. But bishop c3, yeah, is played. So that seems to be a lesser evil. But look at this. A pawn down, but the infiltration opportunities and this knight on f5 give black really the driving seat in this position, because there are possibilities of getting a rook on the 7th. And then also we've got a mobile pawn here crashing through potentially. Not only that, with the queen on a2 in this position, look at this queen, the possibilities of this queen to actually come in on the light squares as well. It's really, really dangerous position already. It may be getting to be positionally lost. Queen a6 is played. On bishop takes b4, yeah, this is too much to bear. d4 and b2 are the issues. So black just wins back a pawn immediately. So white has to stay steady if wanting to keep the material. And now this does control against queen b5 for the moment as well. Bishop takes though, and now the first major infiltration. Yeah, it's trouble is brewing here. We have rook a2, queen c7 now. Queen drops back to a3. But look at this c4 square potentially. This is potentially a source of infiltration on the light squares, or even to e2 sometimes. But for the moment, the b2 is hit. We have retreat, knight d2, protecting the c4 square for the moment. You'll note also in this position, knight takes d4 is not working because the queen is protecting c1. But bear that in mind, because now knight takes d4 is on the cards. We have knight b3 protecting c1 against knight d4 and protecting d4. But the c4 square has been let go of. Leela just goes in there. Knight c5. And now establishing authority on the b file again. Rook e1. And now rook b1. This is really infiltration, attacking stuff. Rook a1. The rook drops back. King h1. And now h4. Attacking on this side of the board. And magic starts to happen after queen a7. While white is, for the moment, in the short run, threatening now knight takes e6 check. The king steps back away from that. Rook c1. But black's pieces of black's pieces of pawns. Okay, no. Speak English. What am I saying? So rook d8, queen a1. Yeah, the queen isn't so well placed on a1. What I was trying to say is black's pieces are poised for infiltration. Not black's pieces are peas, but black's pieces are poised for infiltration here on the light squares. Now what's holding black back here? This knight is controlling an infiltration square, d3. But look at this, h3. And now white cannot afford to keep the dreaded form pawn here, the goal hanging pawn. Because if g3, guess what black can do with massive effect in this position. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, Having the form pawn here is a winning form pawn pretty much straight away. Black to play. Okay, bang, rook takes c5. And this is devastating, actually. Although there's queen d3 available, even better is d4 crashing through. There's queen d5 check now. And then there'll be queen g2 mating. What does white do? Here, this is just like mating. So this is actually devastating. It seems white can do very little in this position. If queen b1, for example, then it's maybe you might try this for this, but there are lots of resources here. d3 threatens d2, shuts down that defense, and it means queen d5 is renewed as well as d2. Yeah, it's horrible stuff, this position generally. So this can't be allowed. That kind of thing can't be allowed. So we have g takes. But now look at this. The rook's double alignment. Okay, it's attacked. It goes back from it a bit. h4. This is a very tricky position because now king g7. And there's another possibility now of rook h8. The knight goes to f6 and the rook's double again. Knight d7. Harassment again. If anything else, if rook here, for example, queen e2, and the queen is just so helpless here. Look at this infiltration. Can only spectate as pieces align on the second rank, on the 7th rank for black, on white's second. So here, like, it's just crushing rook b2, absolutely crushing. No defenses really there. So we have knight d7 now, rook h8, but things are getting very precarious. h5, so precarious in fact, because there's also options of queen d3 all the time. White's just collapsed already here. Queen c6, coming back for that pesky knight. But also there's another horrible thing about this. White just gives up the knight here with rook c2. You might think that's pretty mysterious. Protector, not moving the piece, not protecting it, not even moving it. Okay, the thing is, if knight f6, can you see what black plays in this position? Black to play. We just checkmate the black queen. We checkmate the white queen with rook a8. Yeah, the queen's just going. It's going for nothing. So the knight's just left hanging. It's taken, yeah, a piece up. And you might think, really? Does this really happen to chess engines? But yes, it was just such positional torture. White's position was just collapsing. And this is the feeling I had in the early stages of Leela. It's like your position is just completely positionally crushed and you're going to start losing material, that kind of going down the hill feeling. And that really seemed to happen to this engine here with white, just a piece down, and it's just all over by the shouting. Queen f5, for example, was now threatened for queen e4. I mean, it's a piece up anyway. So that's taken. We have infiltration again. Rook on the 7th. Knight h4, threatening things like queen f3, which would be mating with the knight and rook on h2. So that's stopped for a moment. Rook f2. Rook f3. It's all over. It's just a piece up. And let's see how it finished. The king comes in to support the queen. And now, yep, material's going to be lost soon. Check. Yep, everything's dropping now. Pawns are dropping. And in fact, tactically, this one's dropping to that fork. Nice little temporary queen sack for the fork. It's all over, and it's played to the death this game, and Leela plays for giving up the knight for the winning pawns. And let's see what happens. Yep, one pawn's enough to queen. Checkmate. So, a real positional nightmare after that gambit. That is something I think we can be inspired by. This b5 idea where white is just clinging on to b2 and d4, then you're aiming to get the form pawn in or open up lines for things like rook h8 to crash through on the h file. It's just so much positional pressure to have to bear, and white was ending up moving this knight and losing the knight as a it was just a position with no counterplay. Really impressive stuff. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.